name is Akash Srinivas. I am a freelance writer for the Freethinker UK, and today I have a very special guest with me, the great Shlomo Sand. He's a professor emeritus at the Faculty of Humanity, the Department of History at Tel Aviv University. He's a professor in French history, the political history of the 20th century, and on nations and nationalism. And he's most well known, or perhaps infamously known, for a trilogy of books he wrote on the history of Judaism and Zionism and the relationship between them. The three books that we're here to talk about are The Invention of the Jewish People, The Invention of the Land of Israel, and a kind of personal essay slash memoir of Shlomo's, How I Stopped Being a Jew, an Israeli Perspective. And one of the things that I really loved about your book, Shlomo, is that for me, post October 7th, the entire world was confronted with the question of Palestine. And not a lot of people fully understood what Zionism is as an ideology. They have some kind of understanding that it has something to do with religion or Israeli nationality, but they don't have a full understanding. And what was so interesting about your book was and most especially your first book, was that it decomposed the basis, these presuppositions of Zionism, that being 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people were expelled from Judea after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD or 135 AD, after the revolt of Bar Kokhba, I think, either one. And they kind of wandered in the world. They the Romans took them out of Judea, put them in Rome. They went to Germany. I think it's the Rhine hypothesis. They went eastward to Poland, to Ukraine, to Russia, to the Caucasus, and eventually they returned back to Palestine. This is the general Zionist historiography of the Jewish people for the last 2,000 years. And by asking a series of very foundational anthropological questions, you asked in your first book, what are the people, what is nationality, what is ethnicity? And you decomposed this foundational nationalism myth through this. So could you just explain for people who don't know the foundation of your thesis and how you arrived to this epiphany?
Even if I didn't born in Israel, I grew up in Israel, and Hebrew is my first language. In the first school that I started was in Tel Aviv. You see, I'm Israeli from Jewish origin. In all my life, I was educated, that it was Jewish people that for 2,000 years was wandering in the world. Was rushed from the land of Israel, exiled from the land of Israel. And after 2,000 years, these people decided to come back to his land, his patrie. I was studying it in the first school, and after it in the gymnasium, and after it in the university. But I became a historian. And as a historian, in some moment, I wanted to check what is the meaning of calling the Jews a people when we are dealing with people that don't speak the same language, generally didn't want and don't want, a big part of them, to live together. Take, for example, the people today of the Jew from Jewish origin in New York. They prefer to vote for Mandani and not emigrating to Israel. Anyway,
Yeah.
you see, as a historian of France, I decided that it will not be fair that I will not start also dealing the history of Israel and the history of the Jews. And then I started to write a book, The Invention of the Jewish People. Why invention? Because, I followed Ernest Gellner and I followed Benedict Anderson, two British, by the way, that put the question of what is a nation, what is a people, under another light, new light. And I remember reading the two books, and it pushed me to work differently about the idea of nation. Not only this, also Hobsbawm and others, uh, were dealing with this question. But it was Anderson and Gellner that helped me a lot to formulate a new kind of vision of the Jewish. Now, I wrote a book, and I progressed, and it's a book, I wrote 11 books, but this book, from chapter to chapter, I didn't know what I'm going to write further, really. It wasn't clear at the beginning. And I remember for the moment, I cannot speak about all the steps that I followed, but to give you an example, I was educated in Israel, and I repeated all the time that the Jews were exiled by the Roman, in the first century of calendar. And then I remember going to the library of the university. There are a lot of books about Jews and all this. Going to the library and looking for one book about the exile of the Jews from the land of Israel. And I remember not finding any book in any language I mean, English, French, Hebrew, Italian. I didn't find any book about exile. But one the moment I say, it cannot be. It cannot be. All my life I knew that the Jews were exiled from Palestine. How come? I ran back to our department of history, and I asked the historians of the antiquity, where can I find a book about the exile of the Jews by the Roman? They laugh at me. They say there is not a book like this. How come? How come? Everybody knows that the Jews were exiled, wandering in the 2,000 years in the world. And then I understand that something is wrong, really wrong, about all the concept that I have about Jews and all the concept that I was educated about the Jews. You can imagine everybody is speaking about the Jews. They were exiled from Palestine. And there is one book, one historical book. And then I understood that something is wrong, really wrong. I knew before that the books of history are not objective or natural and all this, neutral. But, it shocked me, and then it pushed me to go further. And then I started to work. After I didn't find the books about exile, I understood that something is wrong. And then I understood that I'm dealing with a religion, a very important religion, the first monotheistic religion that was spread in some moment in the world before Christianity. And then understand that Judaism, it's not a question of people, of nation, it's a question of religion. Until now, after 3,000 years, there is people that believe in the Jewish God. It's okay. But why to translate it politically to a Jewish people? Basically, nobody is calling a group of people that don't speak the same language as a people. Nobody will call people that are not living together, don't want to live together. The voters of Mandani yesterday
Yeah.
don't want to go to Israel, even if Israel is calling them, come to Jerusalem, come to Jerusalem. Anyway, I understood that something is so wrong about all the concept of the Jews, then I decided to continue. And I remember also the moment that I saw that, you see, for example, the Jewish community in Germany, didn't want that Herzl, the founder of the Zionism, will make his congress in Germany. This is the reason that he were obliged to go to Basel in Switzerland to make the congress, because all the 80% of the Jews community didn't want that it will be happen in Germany,
Mm.
a Zionist congress about the Jewish people. And then I remember I knew before the book of Mein Kampf of Hitler that partly were translated also to Hebrew. Anyway, it exists in English. Everybody can open it. Hitler insists because the Jewish of Germany say we are German with another religion. We didn't come from Palestine. We are German for centuries. In the Mein Kampf, everybody can check it this evening. Even I think in the internet we can find it. Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
Hitler insists, no, it's not a religion. It is a race, a people race. And the fact that the Jewish say that they are only a religion is fake. They are a race people. And then I decided to continue to be anti-Nazi, saying that Hitler were wrong. And the Jewish spread as a religion, a monotheist religion. I wrote about it in my first book, The Invention of the Jewish People. And after it, I repeated in other, in 1 month,
Mm.
the edition of Polity, it will appear my book, Judophobia.
Oh, right. Yes. The
So
other one.
the short book, Judophobia, is going to be published in English. And then I followed also the anti-Semitism. I don't call it anti-Semitism before the 19th century because the word didn't exist, anti-Semitism. In the Judophobia, the hate of the Jews started with the Christianity.
Mm.
We have to understand. Uh, by the way, the Christianity built the Judaism. Formed the Judaism. It's not the Judaism formed the Christianity. I think that Christianity gave a special characteristic to the Judaism. In my new
Do you
book,
mean in terms of it influenced how it developed, or do you mean in terms of because most people when they think of Christianity, they think of a kind of heretical sect of Judaism.
I say that the Judaism was different. Like everything in history changed. Judaism till the hegemony of Christianism was different completely. It was a kind of religion that spread, between a lot of people, non-Jews. But the Christianity that appeared and gained the battle between them started to form, to close Judaism on itself. You know, what we know about Judaism today, that continue to be a very important religion in my point of view, you understand? But I think that the Christianism, the hatred of the Christianism, the rivalry, formed the Judaism. This is my new book about Judophobia. It's going to be published by Policy. Then return to the fact that I understood every chapter that Judaism is a religion. And when I say religion, it's very important, but it's not a people.
Mm.
I cannot say English people, French people, and Jewish people. You understand? It's something is wrong in it.
There's no Buddhist people.
Sorry.
There's no Buddhist people. There's no Muslim
Yeah.
people. There's no
You
Hindu people.
understand? Yeah. It's very important, but it's not a people. But it is a kind of legitimation of the existence of Israel. What is I mean by it? Israel is a creation of Zionist colonization. But the Zionist colonization in Palestine was because of the anti-Semitism. You have to know that till 1925, 24, 25, Jewish didn't go to Palestine. They didn't want. They were pushed outside Russia, the Russian Empire, because with the anti-Semitism and hatred of the Jews, but they wanted to go to United States. Till 25, most of the Jew, more than 1.5 million, went to United States. In 24, 25, a senator with the name of Johnson arrived to fix a law against immigration of Jewish, Catholic, an Asiatic. The only that could continue to emigrate to the United States were the Protestant. How we say, the great father of Trump arrived. He could emigrate
From
to
Scotland.
Bavaria, you know, uh, but the Jewish stopped they were not capable to continue to go to New York.
Mm,
And then the migration to Palestine of people from Jewish origin become more important. But till, the Holocaust and all this, it wasn't very important. The Jewish were pushed out from Europe. They didn't want to go away. They were pushed out. It's a legend that they waited 2,000 years to go back to Israel, Palestine, as you want. It's a bluff. Palestine, I mean, the land of Israel was important as something for them very religious. And it was forbidden for them to emigrate to their land of Israel. It was forbidden by Judaism. To give you example, my grandfather, yes, no, the father of my grandfather,
mm,
grand-grandfather, uh, was a very religious person in Poland.
mm,
And before he died, he wanted to be buried in Jerusalem. The Jews didn't want to go to live in Jerusalem,
mm.
but buried in Jerusalem was very important for them. Why? Because with the arriving of the Mashiach, I mean
The Messiah.
the Messiah, uh, all the dead will come up who live around Jerusalem. In this dirty tip, my grandfather, he took all the money, he
Yeah.
bought a ticket on the train and after it on the boat to come, and he's buried in near Jerusalem. He's buried on the mountain of Olives Mountain near Jerusalem. I remember in the War of 67, I was fighting in Jerusalem and I was
Mm,
occupying Jerusalem. In the first month, I was living on the top of the Olive Mountain. My father said, "Go to look for the tomb. Where is my grandfather?"
the cemetery or the
The
graveyard.
cemetery. I didn't go. I was so fed up with the war in Jerusalem and all this. Anyway, going back, Judaism was a very important religion. Uh, was constructed by, first of all, by people that converted to Judaism everywhere in Europe and around the Mediterranean. And later, it started to crystallize as a very special population in East Europe. But, I remember also to be shocked. I heard about the Khazar, something I read, but I didn't believe in the theory of the population of Khazar, the kingdom of the
Kingdom
Khazar,
in the
Khazar
Caucasus
king.
where Russia now is. It was a
Yeah,
kingdom in, I think, the 7th
I
to the
read the
10th
book.
century.
I read the book of Arthur Kessler. He's not a historian, but he has a talent. He was not anti-Israeli, the opposite. He was living in Palestine. And he wrote a book to answer the question, how come that in East Europe there are so many Jews? I tried to give an answer with the history of the Khazar, the empire of Khazar, but I discovered it's not the only kingdom that become Jewish. And then I discovered the fact that there are so many Yemenite, you say?
Yemen.
Jewish Yemenite, that, so very nice girls and boys, with the look of a Yemenite.
Mm.
There is not a difference between a Jewish Yemenite and a Muslim Yemenite. And then I discovered that there was a kingdom of Jewishness in Yemen. Everybody can open the Wikipedia and found the kingdom.
The Himyar, I think it was.
Chemia.
Yeah.
Very good. And then I discovered that it's not the only kingdom. You can find other kingdoms that were converted to Judaism. This is the reason that we have in Israel very nice girls. Really, I am not joking. That don't look my grandmother. Any kind of comparison with my grandmother that I didn't knew her, but I heard about. She was liquidated by the Nazis. Anyway, Israel was founded not because the Jewish people, but because that uh, the anti-Semitism and the Nazism and the Holocaust that brought so many people from Jewish origin to Palestine. In the Zionist colonization of Palestine, I call it a Zionist colonization, succeeded because of the anti-Semitism of the Nazis. My family, you have to know, my parents. I was born, by the way, on the road in Austria after the war.
In Linz, I think it was.
Sorry?
You mentioned in your book it was in Linz in Austria.
I was born in Linz in Austria as a refugee family. After it, I lived 2 years in Germany, near München. And in 48, we didn't have a choice because my father couldn't have a visa to Canada and not to United States. And we arrived to Jaffa. And I was grow up in Jaffa, in a Arab building, by the way,
Mm.
apartment, little apartment. To give you an anecdote, in 73, in the war of 73, I was mobilized in fighting in Sinai, in the war of Sinai,
In the
73.
southern desert, right?
Yeah. I got a few days of holiday and I passed Gaza. And I remember visiting Gaza in 73 and I saw the buildings in Gaza has the same in Jaffa. For one moment, I was troubled, but I understand that the same people built the same
The same
apartment.
architecture.
Yeah, the same people that were living in Jaffa built it also in Gaza. Then, anyway, all these things that I told now, and others also, because I'm a historian, I say I cannot continue to write books about France without confronting myself with the history of Zionism. I didn't put a question the existence of the Israeli identity because Zionism succeeded, the Zionist colonization succeed to build two people, an Israeli people and a Palestinian people. The tragedy is that today the two parts of the conflict don't want to recognize the
Yeah.
other one. The government of Israel don't recognize really the Palestinian people and the rights of the Palestinian people live in Palestine. In the Palestinian, the Hamas also don't accept the Jewish identity. Sorry, they accept the Jewish identity, don't accept the Israeli identity. You see the difference?
Because people think Judaism and Israel is the same thing, or that's the idea in Zionism is that Judaism is not a religion, it's an ethnicity,
Yeah,
and the Jewish people have a right to self-determine
yeah,
in the fatherland, the homeland.
yeah. Anyway, I have some position before writing these books about Israel because I started to fight politically very young to make Israel not a state of the Jews, not a Jewish state, but an Israeli state that everybody is equal. Like, there are English and there are Scottish in your Great Britain, but they have the same right. The same, Britain is not defined as a state only of the Englishmen.
The Anglo-Saxons.
The Welsh also is a part of the Britain citizenship. But
mm,
in Israel, the state is not defined as the state of the Israeli citizens. It's defined as a state of the Jewish nation or the Jews. I mean, a Jew in London has a more right of this state than a friend of mine, a Palestinian that are living in Haifa.
mm.
And this is the point, the moral point of view that political moral point of view that I started to think and to write. And I wrote all the books because I think that Israel is not a real democratic state. The liberalism is strong, relatively is strong. If you consider, the conditions, the conflict, the fact that I can be express myself, as an Israeli and continue to be a part of the Tel Aviv University, it means that there is a kind of liberal,
Pluralism.
yeah, but it's not democratic from a political point of view because it's not a state of its citizens. An Englishman from Jewish origin has the right to come automatically and become a, and between the river and the sea, there are today 7.5, more or less, 7 millions of Israeli from Jewish origin and 7.5 million uh, people that are from Palestinian origin, from Arab Palestinian origin. These two population is living, so near that I don't think we can be separated. From the war of 67, I was for two-state solution. But more and more, last 3, 4 years, I become convinced that it's not possible. On ne peut pas. We cannot separate the two people. We are living, I am happy that there are so many manifestations for Gaza in the world, also in London and England, but I regret that there are not Israeli flag besides the Palestinian flag together. You
Yeah.
understand? I ask here in France, but people don't accept
It's,
because I am, for Palestinian flag, but I thought that it will be much more clever to put besides the two flags as a one flag. You understand me?
yeah.
Yeah, I am maybe naive politically a little bit, but I try to be a good historian.
And one of the things you've done so well in your book is that you take your critics and you actually provide answers. So the idea that the Jewish people were not expelled, you explain that, and then you talk about if they weren't expelled, what happened to the Jewish population in Judah, and how did so many Jewish people move into the Caucasus and to Russia, and you analyze that the Romans were not in the habit of expelling the populations that they colonized. They because they needed like cultivators and farmers and things of this nature. And if you can't grow food in a place, you can't live there. So either the Jewish people were converted or killed, unfortunately. And the way that there were so many Jewish people in the world is through mass conversion. You mentioned the kingdoms that converted. I think there were 5 kingdoms that converted to Judaism. And this was how Judaism spread throughout the Middle East into the Caucasus. And this was the method from Khazaria, where the Ashkenazi Jews from Khazaria became the Jewish people of Eastern Europe and so forth, who went from Poland to
Exactly,
Ukraine to
exactly.
Germany to America.
Yes, my book is an empirical book. I mean, it's not only theories about Judaism. I try to describe and follow the destiny of Judaism as a religion, a very important religion. I mean, and I'm not religious at all. I mean, but I try to be honest in to the Jewish religion. I fight that Israel will not be a religious state. You understand? This is the reason that I'm so critic before this phenomenon of the symbiosis between nationalism and religion in the Islam also. You see, they
We're seeing it also all over the global south. You see, like in India, the fusion of Hinduism and nationalism, and
exactly,
in
exactly,
Myanmar, Buddhism.
exactly. Then, but the fact that Mandani was elected as the mayor of New York give me a little bit hope that even that I am old, I have to continue to fight and to believe.
You're very young, Shlomo. You're very young.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then, I am afraid that I will not see the changes, but I am very pessimist, by the way, but not fatalist. As a historian, I see that it's not very clever to be a fatalist. You understand? And but I am very pessimist because I'm Tel Aviv around people that don't recognize the otherness, don't understand that even we condemn the Hamas in the 7th of October, we don't have to forget that all the leaders of the Hamas are the children of refugees families that came from Jaffa, from Jerusalem, and from
Most people don't realize. I think the three main founders of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, and Ismail Haniyeh, came from Israeli prisons, I think.
they came from Israel prison, but they came from families that were in 48 pushed away by Israel. All of them, all the leaders, Mohammed Deif, Sinwar, and the founder, then even I condemn Hamas politically. Not the problem, terrorists, not terrorists. Politically, they don't recognize the Israeli identity. The people, the Palestinians that don't recognize the Israeli identity will pushed to liquidate the Palestinian people. Pushed Israel to liquidate the Palestinian people. This I am afraid. You understand?
Yeah.
How make it to recognize that we are condemned to live together with Palestinians if we want to stay in the Middle East?
I
We
think you
didn't come
mentioned
from
it.
the Middle East. I came from Poland. Yes, Hitler pushed my family to the Middle East. But really, the last thing that my family wanted is to go to Palestine. We didn't have another choice. By the way, it's very interesting that to mention, I think that I write about it in the book. The Balfour Declaration, that was the basic of the Zionist strategy in the Middle East. In the Balfour Declaration that recognized a Jewish state in Palestine, the Jewish from Britain, the Jewish community didn't go to Israel. It was 250,000 Jewish in Britain. They continued to stay in Britain. I tried to look how many went to Israel because of the Balfour Declaration. Nobody from the British. Nobody. The Jewish community continued to stay in London and other places in Great England, Great Britain.
I think the only one of the British MPs who voted against the Balfour Declaration was the only Jewish member, Sir Edwin Montagu.
A lot of Jewish opposed to the declaration because they're afraid. And the reason that Balfour published this declaration wasn't because he loved the Jews. You have to understand, really, it wasn't the type. It was a calculation about the First World War to have the support of the Jewish in the United States. Also, other thing that served the British imperialism in the Middle East. You see, but it's a tragedy. And for the moment, I'm really, really pessimist, but a pessimist that don't become fatalist. And he said that and I know that people can last moment change the opinion to continue to live, especially understanding that in the Middle East, you cannot keep a Jewish state without the Palestinians. It's not possible. You understand?
Yeah.
Voilà.
And one of the most interesting things about the question of nationalism is that you break it down in your book that there's two main theories of nationalism, the modernist theory and the ethno-symbolic theory. The modernist theory is advocated by like people like Ernest Gellner, Benedict Anderson, and others. And what you basically assert is that nationalism is a kind of imagined community, that it's not, people think of countries as a kind of like eternal thing, that everything is relative, but my country, my society, my people have been here for thousands of years. You know, I think in France they say they're ancestors of the Gaelic tribes from the 5th century or something, or King Clovis. But you mentioned in your book that people from hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, didn't have proper communication. They didn't have newspapers, they didn't have radios, and people in the countryside spoke a different language to people in the city. They spoke different languages, different dialects, and you can't really use the word people in the modern sense of the word because there was no such community. It was very anarchistic.
You see, people believe that the people constructed national state. It is wrong. National state created the people. This is important in my book. A 200 years, the little French pupils learned that about the father, the Gaulois, the Gal, Gaulois. And 50 years ago, everybody in the schools of French was learning that her ancestor were the Gaulois. It's a legend. It's the national state that create the people, not the opposite. And it is the print, the communication, and the new industry that create England and not the contrary. You understand?
Yeah,
People were completely different 200 years ago. They didn't know that they are British. They didn't know that they are English. They didn't know that they are a Jewish nation. You understand? They didn't. They were sure that they are a religion, and it's a religion. You understand? Then it's continued till now also in the post-colonial world that the concept that nations, the Algerian nation who existed for thousands of years ago. You understand? It's unbelievable. Then when I contact Algerian historians or journalists, they believe that the Algerian nation was existed, for a few hundred years ago. No, the national state created people a la envers, you understand, to the past. In my book, I stress this phenomenon that I bought from a few British historians like Hobsbawm, like Anderson, and I mentioned also Ernest Gellner, my dear Ernest Gellner. And on the basic of understanding what is communication, how communication create people, not the opposite. You understand? Communication, moyen de communication, tools of communication created, a national culture. This national culture didn't exist before. In Palestine, it's clear, by the way, that they built the Israeli culture. I mean, Zionism built the Israeli culture, Jewish culture, Israeli Jewish culture, and it's not the opposite. You understand? I'm speaking a language that my grandfather couldn't speak. He didn't know, and not only the language, all the cultural practice around us, it's new. By the way, I have to put forward also the fact that I don't believe that before the Zionist colonization, uh, we can find the Palestinian people. We have to understand it is an Arab population that was living there and were pushed away, but it's not a Palestinian people. Unfortunately, Palestinian people were constructed with the build of the national movement, the Palestinian national movement. It's not the opposite. You understand? This is people cannot accept it so easily. You understand? It's not that the Palestinian people build a national movement. It's the contrary. This is the reason that in 48, nobody really were capable to build a Palestinian state. You understand? It wasn't the Palestinian movement. It doesn't change the fact that the Zionist colonization pushed away people, didn't recognize the right of the population. No import if it's a people population, but there were people living there, and they were not include in the project of Zionist project. There were Zionists, by the way, that accepted the presence of the Arab people as a part of the future state. And I wrote a book, I wrote a book about the possibility before the 7th of October of a federation, because I don't believe that we can separate ourselves from the Palestinian. You understand? Then I wrote a book that was published in English also, in French, in
It's your most
Hebrew.
it's
Huh?
your most recent book. I think it's called Federation or Apartheid.
Yeah. And I try to explain that a lot of people in the Zionist movement understood it very early that it's not possible to separate the population. In the colonial population cannot, push away all the local population. Till I started from the founder of Zionism that always there were others. They say other thing. Till Hannah Arendt, in the end of the book, she didn't believe in 48 that a Jewish state can exist in the Middle East.
Because
She
a Jewish
wasn't.
state would mean an ethnocracy, not
Yeah,
a state of all its citizens.
exactly. Uh, and she wasn't alone. Martin Buber, the greatest Jewish philosopher, also insists till the end of his life that a Jewish state cannot exist in the Middle East. And after the 7th October, I'm more sure about it that a Jewish state cannot exist. In, in my book about the invention of the Jewish people, I see how we can transform a religion to a concept of a nation or a people, the transformation of it. This is my book. And I followed the step by step, showing how, suffering from racism, anti-Semitic racism, built the illusion of Jewish people in the Jewish state.
It's very interesting when you mention your book because there are many Palestinian historians like Rashid Khalidi who uses Anthony Smith's conceptual of ethno-symbolic nationalism to identify Palestinian identity. And many other historians have spoken about how the Palestinian identity goes back to, say, the Palestinian revolt in 1839 or the Palestinian revolt in 1930 or even before the Balfour Declaration.
You see, I don't use the word ethnic because I don't understand what it means. Because every time that people are using the word ethnic, they are speaking about something in the past of kind of a nation, it's not exactly a nation, it's ethnic. But in the basic of the ethnic conception, there is the notion of race. You understand? Because it's not a national identity, it's not a national culture. The basic of, and it started with the war in Yugoslavia, the ancient Yugoslavia, using without stopping about ethnic. And Anthony Smith, yeah, tried to bring it back, the ethnic. We know very little. I was thinking about in my book about speaking about a Jewish ethnic population in the beginning of the century, time. And then I asked myself, how come that a Jewish believer in the Galilee, the north of the land of Palestine, could understand without a school, without newspaper, without books, without knowing reading, that he is belonging to somebody that is living in, in Jerusalem, somebody in Galilee, understood that all this idea of ethnic is false. It keeps something very badly, it's throwing on the past. A kind of common culture didn't exist. I ask the listener in this emission to imagine that people were not going to school. There is not newspaper, there is not books. A peasant, in Galilee, how it come that he has the same culture of somebody who is living in Jerusalem? How come? Maybe a few words, but it was local. The same thing about Britain, the same thing about Poland. How you are speaking 2000 years ago about ethnic, you know, that it surprised me. The beginning of my thinking about against Anthony Smith, against the idea of ethnic, it started in the Yugoslavian war. I met a young friend of, hello, you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, Shlomo. Carry on.
I met one of my family invited a Bosniak, someone from Bosnia, a very nice guy, very young, 17 years old. And I asked him, you are Bosnian? He didn't know I am Muslim. By the way, I said, you believe in God? He said, not at all. Then why you are Muslim? He said, my father is a Muslim. Your father was believing in God? He said, no, he was a communist. Then why you are a Muslim? It's written in my identity card that I am Bosnian Muslim. You understand? They are not Muslims, but they wanted to find origin. People, they are not sure about their identity, are looking back to the ethnic origin. And there is a lot of bluff of all these ideas about ethnic religion. You understand? I'm sorry if British people is hearing us and say, how come? But I have a family 2,000 years ago here near Yorkshire. This is the fantasy of the modernity to looking for origin, to the origin. And why? It's because the future. I mean, always you invent a past if you don't have exactly a future. It's always this, you understand? Then we are different. We have to accept the fact that we are different. We continue to be different. We are changing places in these differences all the time. You understand? This is modernity. And this is the fight against anti-Semitism, that they accept the Jewish as an ethnic, they came from Palestine 2,000 years ago. And this is the reason that I came out against and wrote my book. Uh, you know, I don't attack the Jewish religion in the book, even if I am against Jewish religion, especially that it's official religion of the state of Israel. But I don't have political problems with religious people when they don't bother me.
Yeah, if they do that.
Yeah, you understand. Okay, this is it. Okay.
Mm. In terms of the question of ethnicity, most people, when they hear the term ethnicity, they think bloodline, they think DNA, they think descent from however many generations ago. What you did in your book was you differentiated religion from ethnicity, and then you separated ethnicity from DNA, because an ethnicity is a human group that has certain set of cultural practices, secular practices, food, music, language, music, comedy, poetry that has nothing to do with religion. And that's what constitutes a political community such as a nation.
You see, as a Israeli from Jewish origin, I am upset to see people in United States and Yeshiva University looking for DNA of Jews. They didn't find till now a DNA of Jewish, but they continue to look, they invest money in all this to find the DNA of the Jewish. For me, they are not Nazis at all, but they continue a Nazi thinking, a Nazi behavior that can finish badly in the Middle East. You understand?
I think there's geneticists in I think in what was it? In American universities, like say the University of Arizona, who make the argument that the Jewish people have similar DNA to ancient Mediterranean populations, and therefore this proves that the Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews all originate from the same area.
Oh, it's a bluff. I worked, I think 3 weeks, I was working only about it, reading everything about the DNA. Really. I started to write. By the way, when the book was published, I got letters from gynecolog. I mean, not gynecolog, people that are working about DNA from France and Portugal. They say that it's a bluff, the DNA of the Yeshiva University of New York. It's a
Mm.
bluff. And by the way, for all this, they are thinking the DNA. I invite them to come to Israel and to see the nice Yemenite girls in speaking about the DNA. You understand? It's something exceptional, dangerous. You understand? Thinking because the determinism inside, the determinism. Determinism, you say in English, yeah? Determinism in the concept that people belong each other because of the DNA. It's something, very bad that the Zionism got from anti-Semitism, racist anti-Semitism.
It's the ethnobiological basis
Yeah.
that I think there are some geneticists like Iran El Hayek who've done the
Yeah, he's
opposite.
a nice work. I know him. He contact me in some moment also with the others people, not from Israeli origin, that wrote me about it, and he wrote about it, and he was hated by a Israeli biolog, stupid biolog. And he's not the only one, by the way. I got other letters that people that wrote me, but they say not mention their names because they are afraid from Zionists. They are afraid that if they will contest the idea of a Jewish DNA, they will be considered como anti-Semitic.
It's so strange because
It's
in the
strange.
past, people used to say that if you thought of the Jewish people as an alien race that can't integrate with society, that was anti-Semitism. And now they say that
The
if you say
opposite.
that the Jewish people are normal, then
Unbelievable, unbelievable. I got critics that say, he put in question the Jewish DNA. He's anti-Jew. Okay, I am anti-Jew if this is the concept of the Judaism. I repeat, Judaism, the first monotheism. Historically, we have to understand it. It was something important in some moment of history, and like everything in history, it take place in other sense that the beginning. But without Judaism, we couldn't think about Christianity. You understand? And not about Islam. You know? But the three religion, monotheist religion. And today also the problem is of also in place of the symbiose between socialism and nationalism that have a lot of problems, we have the symbiose more and more strong between Islamism and nationalism. And we are living it daily in the Middle East today.
I think you mentioned in one of your previous interviews that whenever the myth of the past is, or the myth of the future is not um,
Yeah,
conceived of
no,
properly,
it's
people
good.
turn back to the myth of the past.
If a lot of the myth of the future reduced the myth of, you read me
Yeah,
much better than a lot of people. The myth of the past, because the phenomenon, what I say is about Islamism and nationalism, it's also in Jerusalem between Judaism and you know, there is a symbiosis today between nationalism, Zionist nationalism, in Zionist religion, in Jerusalem. They are ministers, they are thinking in the terms of, of race, religion, and all the symbiosis between nation and religion. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in Gaza that lead the population with a few concepts that I am very critical about. Even I think you have to understand that I support to always the oppressed in the past, in the present, and I hope to in the future. But it doesn't mean that the oppressed is acting always rationality with the rationalism. You understand? The violence of the oppressed is not building a new people like Frantz Fanon was thinking. It was building a new authority, the violence of the oppressed. He continued to be oppressed, and we have to fight against the oppression of the Palestinian people. But not to forget, the oppressed can be irrational and also assassin. You understand? We have to understand, support the oppressed with knowing that it is not automatically build a new world. You understand? Fanon believed it, and Jean-Paul Sartre believed it. I don't believe it. I think that we have to always to support the oppressed without illusion. You
I think
understand
you
me?
mentioned in one of your previous interviews that one of the problems with the way the Israeli state is set up is that because it's an ethnocracy and the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Israeli Arabs, have second-class citizenship, you're worried about a Kosovo in the Galilee, a Kosovo type situation where the Palestinian Arabs say, if this is a Jewish state, then we're going to make our own state, and that will lead to a kind of civil war or something.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, in 89, it was Abed el-Shafi, the mayor of Gaza, invited me with other professors from Tel Aviv University to a dialogue. He was a great man, Abed el-Shafi, but we don't have people like Abed el-Shafi in the head of the Palestinian population in Gaza, unfortunately. You understand? He invited me and it impressed me. He was the friend of mine like Mahmoud Awish. It's till now, Mahmoud Awish, the fact that I met him influenced me all my sensibility. You understand? Not the thinking, but the sensibility. Okay? But we don't have on the leadership of the Palestinian people today people like Abd el-Shafi or Mahmoud Awish, unfortunately. But we don't have people like that in the Israeli side, no, non plus. You have to understand. It's terrible.
Hmm.
It's
We
terrible
have
in Israel.
Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and Netanyahu.
The dangerous people, that if the world will not stop them, it will finish really bad, much worse than today.
One of the
Okay,
good
I
things.
have to finish because I started to be a little bit tired.
Okay.
Because it's in English. If it was in France, it was easier for me. Okay?
Yeah, it's no problem. Okay. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Shlomo. People can find your books anywhere on Amazon or any of your Verso books, I think it is. And you go into great detail about the origins of the conflict as well as the basis of Zionism. And it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, Shlomo. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.